This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome to No Question About That. This is United Inc., our irregular finance pod with me, Ed, and that is Jamie over there. How's it going, Jamie? Doing all right?
Yeah, good. The sun is shining for once in London. We're at the heady heights of mid-teens as we, I think, approach spring. United would have won 5 games out of 6. I just found out today that I was one of the lucky few to get a ticket to Bournemouth away.
Wow.
Life is good.
Life is good. Well, what is making Sir Jim happiest at the moment? Is it performance on the pitch, which has been pretty good, 5 wins out of 6 under Michael Carrick, very much justified his sacking of Ruben Amorim? Is it the financials, which we're going to talk about in depth now? It's a pretty rosy picture if you take the top line justification of the reorganisation that Ineos have done, I'd say. Or is it the polling numbers for Nigel Farage, his mate, who he loves a lot? Answers in the comments below. All right, we'll get to the actual financials because that's what we're talking about. Second quarter results, fiscal 26, were out. And it's a pretty, I'd say you could be quite bullish about this. So revenues are holding despite not being in European competition. We'll dig into why that is the case. Debt is up a little bit, but around about the same. EBITDA is looking pretty rosy, and there's actually an operating profit this quarter. Wow, nothing will get Sir Jim happier than that. So what did you make of United's second quarter results?
Yeah, look, I thought they were good. They are a reflection of a number of decisions which we've talked about at length over the past 18 months. And I think it shows you the foundations in what they're trying to build in terms of the setup of the business. I hate to use the word business. Setup of the club as a business, and where that can lead to if they make the right decisions and they execute well. The revenue piece was solid. As you said, we'll get into the details of why. There's a few moving parts there. I think the wage bill will inevitably garner a lot of attention. Look, we've talked about the redundancies that were made, why they were made, how they were made. I can agree on the why, not on the how, but the reality is what we're seeing now is a result of that. And in terms of what it will mean in terms of ongoing financial strength, should we get into the Champions League, there are reasons to be optimistic. I will always put my cautiously optimistic hat on, but I was encouraged by it.
Yeah. So top line revenues year over year are they were slightly down, but EBITDA was very strong actually, and then the operating profit this quarter alone was just a touch over 30 million. And I guess the headline is that this was the financial plan, right? It would be if United were in the Champions League right now, the club would be in a very healthy financial position. I mean, obviously, costs, the overall wage bill would be up because of the bonuses that are paid for players being in the Champions League, and you need a larger squad, and we'll get to that next year. Touch wood. Don't jinx it. Touch wood. That United make that. But I think this is a justification on a purely financial level of the pretty brutal turnaround in operating structure and the org structure that Ineos have put into place over the last 2 years, right? They've ripped out £50 million a year out of costs, basically. And it's reflected both in the normies that were let go, as you say, brutal on a personal level, but also the attempt to rationalise the wage bill, lose some of the highest spenders. That's going to change even more after the summer, when we assume that Casemiro is definitely leaving. Harry Maguire will be on a restructured contract, maybe heavily incentivised or something like that. There's Marcus Rashford's obviously off the books. Jadon Sancho is off the books. Rasmus Højlund. Maybe Napoli will trigger that option. Unclear right now. It's quite tight in Serie A. And so all of this, plus a change around in how they've done the analytics department, health and operating department, and so on, all of that is kind of justified. I don't know whether you saw in this financials, because I couldn't see it through my scan today, whether we got a clear indication of how much they had to pay Ruben Amorim. I didn't see the exceptionals line.
No, so there was no exceptionals reported in this quarter. So this quarter was the period from the 1st of October to the 31st of December.
All right, we'll get that in the next quarter then, yeah.
What we will probably see is and today we've got like a skinny release. In the next few days, we'll get the full interim report.
Yeah.
We will likely get that number because it will be a meaningful number when that report comes out.
Right, as a note.
Exactly.
Of some kind, yeah. For non-SADOs, I should say, that don't read all this kind of stuff, typically, even if it's not in the quarter, they'll add a note to their P&L to show important things that have happened, and so we'll get a sort of £10 million cost on there for sacking Ruben Amorim and his team, something like that, I imagine. Yeah. I gave the headlines there, and it looks fairly good. If you dig into the P&L, of course, the debt pile is quite high, so I think it's immediate debt. The Bank of America thing that we saw extended a few weeks ago is about 295 or something like that. It's quite an eye-watering amount of cash debt, and that's to say nothing about all the bonds that we know about, of course.
Yeah, so that's the revolving credit facility. And yeah, like we were told at the last set of results, we were told that there was a net 60 million drawdown, which I think took the overall kind of balance left that we could draw down to 55 million. If you look at the cash flow reported today, it actually looks like that there was 35 million paid back. Or sorry, an incremental 5 million paid back. So we might have a little bit more flexibility there. And so look, the cash pile is very, very low. It's down at 44 million. Not to be unexpected, like the cash flow that the business is, or that the club is generating this year, the 190 million of EBITDA, that is all being used up on historic transfer costs.
Yeah.
And so to see this dwindling now, not a surprise, but it's one of the reasons why the Champions League is so important, because you get that drop through of the revenue, and as we're clearing through some of those old debts, one of the big numbers that I look at is that net transfer payable. The most important thing to remember is that at the end of last year, there was more of that net transfer debt due in the next 12 months than in the following 2 to 5 years. So actually, once we cycle through this, that kind of cash flow outlook, depending on how we spend money, starts to look a little bit healthier.
That's right. And the move to squad cost ratio laws next season in the Premier League actually helps United significantly. So not only will that, as a business, doesn't make much difference, right? They still have to operate the company. They still have 25 to 30 million pounds of interest payable each year. They still have to pay off all the payables in terms of historic transfers and all of that kind of stuff. But that interest drops off the calculation. It is in PSR calculations and it is not in the squad cost ratio rules. And so United are going to be in a pretty healthy position there. Of course, the worst scenario of all, I mean, I can't reiterate how bad this is to get into the Conference League. So to have a bad end to the season and end up like 7th or something like that, Chelsea and Liverpool overtake us and we're in the Conference League. And so that 70% line, the green line, would come into effect in both UEFA and Premier League competitions, and the revenue is right. It's basically you lose money being in the Conference League, so that would be very, very bad indeed, Jamie. Champions League, on the other hand, we'd be looking at 80 to 100 million top line additional revenue, something like that, maybe even more, right? So I think City made about 80 by being knocked out in the round of 16 last year.
Yeah, I think it will depend. It will depend on the coefficients, and we're probably we'll be okay, but not amazing, just because of our recent European record.
And the coefficients matter for two reasons. One, it's the overall pool of money available for a particular league. The Premier League coefficient is very high, and then you get a share of that pool depending on your coefficient. It will be okay because we made a Europa League final a year ago, right? So that will be quite high, depending on who else is in the top 5 or 6.
Yeah, so it will help us, but if we, for instance, I wouldn't expect us to get as much money as Man City if we dropped out at the same stage as them. They would
correct.
They would they would earn more than us.
Yeah,
and I think on the squad cost rule, kind of a word of caution, in so much that based on the calculations that I do, I think that we are actually relatively close to that 70% mark already, which, look, it's fine. If we qualify for European competition, our capacity to spend will increase. But I think it's another thing to just bear in mind that whilst we'll have a little bit of headroom, it won't be it still will be a constraint that we have to think about when we're buying players. So that wage structure that they've worked very hard to put in place on the playing side, it's not like that they'll be able to kind of rip that up just by being in the Champions League for one season.
Yeah, fair enough. Yes. Oh, I mean, in theory, you could do it on the Premier League side because you have that little buffer thing, right?
Yes.
So, but not with UEFA, and UEFA are policing this fairly strictly. Well, they may not be kicking teams out of the competitions anymore after the Manchester City UEFA verdict when they were found guilty on 2 counts. We should mention for any City fans, guilty. So think about that when you're thinking about the 1,500-page verdict that comes down from the independent commission in the Premier League at some point in the next decade or something. Yeah, okay, fair enough. United still have to manage their budget. Of course, when we think about squad cost ratio, there's significant amount of wages coming off in the summer and some revenue coming in, although I wouldn't expect too much. There'll be nothing for Jadon Sancho or Casemiro, for example, but there is £600,000 worth of wages per week coming off the bill.
Totally. Well, not exactly, because we're not currently paying for Sancho.
We're not paying for Jadon Sancho.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think actually, we haven't touched on revenue yet, but on the wage bill, that is one important thing to remember, I think, in this set of numbers. If you look at the comparison, i.e. versus last year, we were actually paying for a number of players that are no longer either with the club or that we're paying for. So the likes of Eriksen, Lindelof, Antony, Rashford, there's quite a long list.
Quite a lot, yeah.
Yeah, of players where, okay, we might still own their registration, but we're not paying their wages. Mm-hmm. And therefore, that kind of percentage decrease year on year looks quite big. As we go through next year, that effect will no longer be there. It's obviously, if we're in the Champions League, it will grow anyway, but then there will start to be an underlying increase, I imagine, because of the players that we're going to be buying. Like, it's even if we do get rid of Casemiro's going, and even if Maguire's on a lower contract, we've got replacement cost.
Yes, that is true. All right, let's talk a little bit about the breakdown of the revenues, because some of it would be unsurprising, right? There's a slight decrease in commercial revenue. This is, the training kit dropped off some time before that, right? This is year over year from 25 to 26, quarterlies, slight decrease. There's a lot of room for growth there, I would say.
Yeah.
Training kit, new sleeve sponsor, We haven't even talked about stadium rights, which they are not doing yet.
Training ground.
Training ground. Yeah, this is 25 to 35 million pounds a year left on the table, something like that at the moment.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip. When it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Match days modestly down. I can't remember how many games year over year we've lost because of not being in the cup competitions, but obviously when the full year come out, match day is going to be down quite significantly, although maybe this reflects some changes in pricing.
Yeah, that's the hidden thing here which hasn't been mentioned, right? We lost 3 games versus last season. And now look, season tickets would have covered, like, I felt the pain of this myself. We're paying higher prices and seeing less games. But, you know, those tickets that go out to members, et cetera, we're not getting that incremental revenue. Obviously, there is the dugout style seats that have been put in alongside the other ticket price rises. That's the thing. Well, yeah, like that's the reality of that number. And it's the reason why it's only down 5%.
Yeah. And then broadcast, as we mentioned at the top of the show, up slightly, or some assumptions around that as well. It really does matter. I mean, the difference between finishing, what were we last season? 15th. And 4th or 3rd as we could finish this season, touch wood. Everything goes our way. Michael Carrick ball continues to truck along. It's going to be huge, right? That is a £40 million increase just in prize money alone, something like that. No Euro prize money, obviously, and nothing from the FA Cup or the League Cup. They wouldn't add much anyway.
No, but I mean, to this point, right, like to put into context the importance of the league position, that 40 million increase if we get in the Champions League top 4, that more than offsets the loss in Europa League prize money for reaching the final.
Yeah.
We got about £31 million. It pays to do well in the Premier League. I mean, it seems bonkers to say it, but it's a matter of fact.
Indeed. Yes. And actually, if you look at Chelsea's accounts and how much they made from winning the Conference League, it's just like nothing, basically. It's like 10 million quid or something like that. It's 10%, 10 and a bit percent if you take the ratio to the Champions League. And the Europa League's 22, 23% on the pound, euro, dollar, whatever number you want to come up with there. Champions League is extremely lucrative now because you get a lot of games. There's a lot of prize money in there. UEFA had to buy off the Super League teams by restructuring the financials and giving them any more games. And it's just a huge prize to be in there. And of course, there's the potential prize of a Club World Cup if you can reach the final of any of these European competitions, basically.
Yeah, and I think the power of the Champions League, I think Man City, on a per game basis, they earn about 50% more from the Champions League than they do in the Premier League.
Right.
Kind of says it all, right? Like that is the reason why all these clubs want to and kind of need to be in the Champions League. Without that, you don't have the eyeballs, you don't have the sponsorship revenue, all the good stuff that comes with it.
Yeah. Let's roll this forward just a little bit then, because EBITDA margins at 9 and a bit percent. They're guiding 190 or something for the full year of operating cash. Basically, they will spend all of that almost certainly, one would imagine. But roll it forward to a year's time when we've just made the quarterfinal of the Champions League. I really am jinxing this right now. What will we be talking about in Q2 of 2027? I mean, likelihood is that we'll be talking about a very healthy club picture, but still with 500 and something million pounds of debt.
Yeah, I'll answer that in 2 parts, right? And I'll answer the first part directly. If we got into the Champions League, I imagine the club would be guiding to at least 250 million pounds of EBITDA annually. As you say, that will be spent on I think realistically continuing to reinvest and upgrade in the squad. Right. The transfer junkies will love it. All of a sudden, United have got some cash again, and we can go to town. So I think that's one thing. However, we talked about this in the past. We've got inclinations that something may have happened in regards to this relatively recently, and that's the debt refinancing. Now, whether that is, we don't know yet, but we will know very soon, whether the credit facility was extended and refinanced and renegotiated on a lower rate, or whether it's the Glazer debt that gets refinanced. We know that is going to happen soon. That will be at a higher interest rate, and that 30 million pounds of interest cost will rise. So you heard it from us here first. Prepare to get angry when that refinancing happens, because that will, as good as the EBITDA is, that will eat into it significantly and will reduce what we can spend on transfers, on players, on other upgrades, etc., etc.
Yeah, because when we financed that last time out, so everyone will remember the bonds in 2010, green and gold, David Beckham wearing the scarf. Everyone was very angry, a lot of big protests. And then it was refinanced in 2015, 16, something like that. I can't remember the exact date. At a very low rate. And that was basically when money was free. That's when people like Jamie were rolling around in their Rolls Royces, popping vintage champagne, buying fur coats, hanging out with the oligarchs, because there were good times for finance bros. And now the world is very different. There is no free interest. Although the Fed is quite aggressively cutting interest rates at the moment. So that bodes relatively well to, say, 2 years ago when we were in the mire of very expensive money.
Yeah, 4-5%.
Relatively. Yeah, I know. I'm basically free. Look, side anecdote here. There's very nice incentives for putting solar on your roofs, federal grants and stuff like that. And if you have a decent wage, you can write off a hell of a lot of tax, right? So we had to get our roof done. We were like, hang on a minute. If we put solar on the roof, we basically get a 40% cut. It's basically free, right? Yeah. And then we were like, hang on a minute. Should we finance this or pay for it in cash? You're doing $60,000 of work on your house. You probably don't want to pay that in cash. We financed that at 1.7% interest. So it's cheaper than inflation. So it's free money. United's bond was slightly more expensive than that, but not that much more, right? And we'll probably be looking at a ticket price of what, 8 or 9% now on. I don't. What's the Bank of America stuff at? That's even more than that, isn't it? Right? It's quite expensive.
It is. I think I should know. I think we can look it up as we go along. But look, I mean, interest rates, even from when you've the time that you talked about, have at least doubled, maybe tripled. So even if they're coming down, and look, the thing that will work in our favour, and this is another thing to remember about the cuts, the cold light of day of finance, the fact that we have trimmed the cost base and restabilised the books, got us being profitable again, etc., showed some capital discipline. That will work in our favour when we go to the banks and say, hey, we need to refinance this.
Yes, absolutely.
That will make a massive difference. So whilst, I'm probably contradicting myself here, whilst interest rates have risen, and that should theoretically mean that the interest charges go up, all of that cost restructuring will be doing a lot of work to kind of mitigate what the theoretical increase should be.
Absolutely. Yeah, because United's risk profile is obviously much better when the club is making a profit. It would definitely help if you can do that a few years in a row. But tell us about when the bonds mature. So one is in 27 and the other is 28 or something like that. They're not in the same year, are they?
Yeah, I am double checking now. Off the top of my head, it is 2027 and 2029. are the two bits of quote-unquote Glazer debt. And then the credit facilities were extended to, I believe, 2029, when there was an update, like basically during the last summer transfer window.
Right.
$425 million, which have got a fixed interest rate of about 3.8%. Those mature in 2027, June 27. So that's a big chunk of the Glazer debt. There is then another $225 million, which will be at a slightly higher interest rate maybe, which is in 2029. And then there's the credit facilities, which is also 2029. So it's a big chunk of debt being refinanced in 2027.
Yeah. Then a bit more in 29. All right. We'll see whether that comes along with any changes in equity ownership. A quick note on some movement since we're talking about equity. It doesn't mean much, but Lindsell Train, who've been a long time investor, I think they Mike Lindsell and John Train or something like that. I forget their first names. Lindsell Train. They sold about 4 and a bit million shares to Omega Capital, which is another private equity firm. It doesn't really mean anything. There's a notification on EDGAR, which is the SEC's sort of electronic portal for looking at these things. You have to notify of anyone who owns more than 5%. In this case, common A stock, right? They don't have super voting rights or anything like that. Don't mean much. I don't even know why anyone bothers to invest in United, because you've not been making a lot of capital on these shares over the years.
I agree with that. I think, the reason why some investors may want to invest in United is, look, we do know that there is a date in around about a year's time, which we've talked about at length.
Yeah.
There is potentially something that would happen in terms of a change of ownership. It would be in terms of the deal construct, it would be theoretically the time that would make the most sense for a change in ownership to happen. And so what you will tend to find is that there are many funds out there who will trade different companies on the stock exchange based on these types of events. Whether they have an edge on any of that stuff is anyone's guess. As you said, I think it's very hard to read into a movement like this in any that it signals anything.
Yeah, probably doesn't. Okay, and then before we close out, there was a note in the release about the Mayoral's Development Corporation and the new stadium project. Andy Burnham, who leads that, was not very complimentary about Sir Jim Ratcliffe's comments about the UK being colonised by immigrants. I wonder if those two have made up yet. Ratcliffe's apology certainly wouldn't have helped that at all. But no significant movement on the stadium front other than a note in the release, which they keep putting in to say that they are moving ahead. So they've got approval on the planning process, basically. We haven't seen that they bought any land yet off Freightliner, which was the big sticking point. So I would imagine we'd get a note on that when they actually do it, if they do it.
Yeah, and I think that's in terms of like immediate priorities of the MDC, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the MDC. That will be pretty high up there. Typically, an MDC can basically push through a land sale if they can.
They could.
Yeah, if they can justify it from a public benefit point of view.
Yeah.
That's typically what they have done in the past. I would imagine that's one of the things that would be very high on their list just to get done, because, as you say, alongside the question mark about the funding, that's probably one of the biggest hurdles at the moment.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And the complexities around that are, one, you could push through a compulsory purchase order. I'm sure all parties would not want to do that because you end up in court fighting it and so on. But there's also some potential government funding over moving that freight terminal closer to Liverpool, because there's a public interest in ensuring that it's open for trade and so on and so on and so on. So I think that's what will end up happening in the end. They'll come to a negotiated price on the land. United will buy that. They own about 100 acres already, United, so quite a bit of land around there. Not all of it, by the way, that would have new housing on. or transport links and stuff like that. And then there'd be some tax money available to Freightliner to move that terminal. Freightliner, which has very interesting ownership structure as well, partly Qatari owned, I believe, which is, don't know, when Sir Jim is shopping around the stadium project, I wonder who their partners could be. Kind of interesting when they visit the Middle East for various financial conferences and all of that.
Well, didn't he made at the time, a rare quip, is it quip, about the Qataris and selling to the Qataris. So, yeah, that'll be an interesting conversation. And to your point, maybe that's why the price of said land was put at a exorbitant valuation, because that's how some guys operate.
Well, very true, yeah. And I mean, I think in terms of that whole development scenario, given how close Manchester Council has been, and I know not all of this is Manchester Council, but how close they have been to Abu Dhabi on the development of East Manchester, which looks very different than it did 15 years ago, for sure. But there have been some very friendly policies there and continue to be with Manchester City's expansion of their stadium. Can't fill the stadium, just to note.
You saw the pictures of the other week, right?
Yeah.
Like, was it a League Cup? I can't even remember.
It was a League Cup semi-final. Yeah.
And I think it was more than 20,000 empty seats.
Interesting. I don't know why that's interesting. Just is. I wonder how many people they'll get turning up in the Championship when they're eventually relegated.
Isn't it League One?
League One, yeah. I'll tell you what, Jamie. I was on another podcast the other week called The Trouble with Football, if you want to check me out there, complaining about VAR. It's a fun podcast, actually. And I was talking about how during the good times, I was still fairly level-headed about Manchester United's success. When we're back and City have been relegated, as they rightfully should be, I'm going to be an absolute cunt.
I feel those sentiments deeply. I was talking to someone who I'd sit near to in the ground, and this actually happened last season, but I can't remember which game it was. But for whatever reason, fans were up before the game, which last season was saying something because it was a league game that we were going to. It wasn't a Europa League game. And I was just looking around like Manchester Piccadilly Station, and I was like, it is all United fans. And look, that's completely anecdotal. There will be more data on that, I'm sure, that's released shortly to contradict it. But it did make me think, when we are consistently good again and fighting for the title, I think people have almost forgotten like the power of this club. Mm-hmm. And I was saying to them, I was just like, can you imagine what this is going to be like when we're winning, like consistently? And he's just like, yeah, it will be like the old days, and people will be bouncing around. Yeah.
Can't wait. We're on the look, for better or worse, and I think Sir Jim, don't have too many nice things to say about him. The restructuring is working on a financial sense. The headwinds are there, right? There is a huge pile of debt. They still have to work out how to refinance that in a more difficult financial environment. They have to work out how to finance the stadium. Ineos are not doing great, although I think some of the rather extravagant headlines about their potential demise are exaggerated. They also are on a path towards cutting their big pile of debt. It's a very capital-intensive industry, oil and gas and petrochemicals, so they always run with a lot of debt. Not unusual. The stuff's better on the pitch. We are very likely to qualify for European competition. It would have to be pretty disastrous. And Brentford would have to make up 9 points on us, basically, for United to not qualify for European competition for at least the Conference League.
I was going to say, that's a very good point. I didn't think about it like that.
Yeah. The Europa League is slightly different because it's really only sixth place. Although if a Premier League club wins the Champions League or the Europa League, which is quite possible, right? Villa could win the Europa League, then that just changes things a little bit. And so United are in a very strong position, playing well, play some of our rivals, which may help them, may help us. You can see that good times are on the horizon. And then if you look at the club's transfer policy, if you take Ugarte out of it, which was like a hurried purchase in the first transfer window, they've had a very, very, very good hit rate on transfers under Wilcox, Ratcliffe, Barada, Vivell. Push that forward, another great window, and the good times are back, baby.
Oh, it's amazing how quickly we can start to get optimistic. But you are completely right, and it's it's the old adage that Roy Keane often says: recruitment is key, and that is, is the technical ability of the player good enough? Is the personality of the player what you want in your culture? And three, do the financials stack up? And yeah, to your point, they've been doing a really good job. I hope that they can continue. Like, it's my big fear is that if we get into the Champions League, we'll have our eyeballs ripped out again.
Yeah.
Nottingham Forest or Brighton's asking price will jump from 70 to 120, and we have to meet them at 90. All of a sudden, that budget is like gone. Can
get eroded very quickly. Yes, and also United have quite a thin squad, right? Yeah. And there's quite a need, given that Ugarte will be sold, Zirkzee will probably be sold. We know the other players are leaving, Casemiro's leaving. We'll see what happens with Maguire. Champions League squad needs quite a lot of new players in there. And you can see with what's happened with Palace and Forest this year, not so much Villa, but also Newcastle, right? Pretty poor performance. That if you don't have a big enough squad, it can really eat into your squad with injuries and fatigue and so on. And we've not had all these like weeks of having a week off to plan and prepare and train. You just don't get anymore.
Yeah,
and more injuries.
Yeah, and I'll do a shameless plug of one of my recent Substacks. The academy is not just a platitude. It will be a necessity. Like,
it will be.
Go and read it. But essentially, to fill a lot of these gaps on still, whilst it's an improving budget, it's a relatively constrained one. We need to go back to our roots and have young players coming through and making this, like, taking that step, showing the commitment, the desire, and the right attitude.
Absolutely. To fill out the squad, and if they don't quite make it at United, to sell, as Manchester City continue to do. Chelsea, sort of. I don't know. Their trading's weird, isn't it, these days? But City managed to sell an academy player every single year, at least one, for 20 to 40 million pounds, and it is a massive revenue stream for them. And as Pep keeps complaining, their net spend is quite low compared to other teams. Now, there's a few reasons for that.
Just don't sell Oscar Bob for 30 million then. Give it away to Fulham for free. That's the right thing to do.
Exactly. A morally correct thing to do, yes, as the Abu Dhabi regime always thinks about, yeah. All right, I think we'll leave it there. So the headlines are things are travelling in the right direction. On the financials, the restructuring has worked. The transformation plan has worked, as it said in the press release. It is very dependent on European football, this heading in the right direction. And on the horizon, as we've known for some time, are some rather large refinancings. We'll find out in the next quarter whether they're going to do anything on that. But it'll be soon we start to see them shopping that around. Jamie, as ever, find the director's inbox on Substack or Subprime Goals, also on Substack, for general football, financial writing, and Manchester United focused stuff. You can find Jamie on Subprime Goals on all the socials. Don't ask me what his handles are. I have to look them up every single time.
I've taken your advice. I've started changing.
Very good.
Yeah, I still need to do the Twitter one, but that will happen. I can't do it around results because you get tagged in everything, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, is he gone? So that will happen.
Changing your handle, you have to remember to sign up the old one as well, just in case. Do it at the same time, because I did not do that when I changed from United Rant to NQAT, and someone else got it, and I was like, you fucker, give it back, which they did, but they won't always, but it happens immediately.
Duly noted.
Duly noted. All right, NQAT Pod, you can find me on all the socials and on Substack. I wrote a piece on Kobe Mainoo's new contract. That'll add into the financials. They're going to quadruple his wages or more when that new contract is signed.
Oh, sorry. I was like...
He's only on 25 grand a week, Jamie. He can barely live on that.
I had a different number in my head and I was like, what? No, that sounds about right.
Sounds about right. You can find our extra show, which I need to record, on patreon.com/NQATpod or on Apple podcast subscriptions. And we'll catch you next time after the Palace game. Go on, you Reds.